it's a genre. The word genre is a French word, comes from the French language, and it refers to a certain category. So we have genres of literature, poetry, historical fiction. If I wrote a story about China in, say, the year 500, and I wrote a story, that would be historical fiction, set in a certain period of time in the past, but a made-up story, not a true history. And there are many genres. Well, science fiction refers to, it didn't truly happen, it was created in someone's mind, a story, but it's based on advances in science. So if you look at the library, go to George Bothwell Library or downtown, and there'll be a section of the library called science fiction. And in some of those stories, they will be set in the future with inventions that we do not have now, but someone has imagined them. So science fiction explores this very question of what is a human? And can machines become human? And it almost seems like there's a desire to create a human that is a robot. Here's another word we talked about in the past, another word. We use these two words with regard to humans. We have a body, but we say we also have a soul and a spirit. And we struggled when we talked about this. What is the difference between the soul and the spirit? And I understand in your mother language as well, it's not so easy to distinguish soul and spirit. I mentioned that in the Greek language, the New Testament was written in the Greek language. The word pneuma, it's this word in Greek. It looks like this. Pneuma, it's pronounced. We get pneumonia from that word. And this word pneuma can mean spirit. It can mean breath. It can mean wind. And you can see the similarity. When humans when they're living, they breathe. And we can say, we can see almost, or we're aware of their spirit. They're an animated body, a living body. They have a spirit. And what is the soul? Something deeper, something essential to who we are. So can a robot have a soul? I think not. The soul is something God creates, I think. And it's essential to being human. If you have ever seen a person who has died, a body, no breath, you have a sense the spirit is gone. There is no spirit in that body, that dead body. But that body is still human, in a sense. They still are. And we honor the body. We clean it carefully, bury it carefully, with dignity, because it is human, though the spirit has left. Anyway, it's a fascinating question. And for Jeff and Sherry, what we try to do in this class is I try to help you with your English, pronunciation and word meanings, and sometimes some grammar. But also I try to teach the Christian faith. And so that will come out. That's why we use as our textbook the Bible. And we're reading this letter that a man named Paul wrote to a church in the city of Colossae. It's located, I don't think the city exists anymore. This letter would have been written in the 1st century, so close to 2,000 years ago, a very long time ago. But it was located in the modern country of Turkey. Or I think it's called Turkey or something like that now. They just changed their name. We also call it in geography Asia Minor. China is at the heart of Asia, but Asia Minor is that little part of Asia that is right up against Europe. In fact, there's I think just a river that separates Turkey from Greece, I think, on the other side, and Asia and Europe. So anyway, it's in that area. Paul, when he wrote the letter, was in prison or jail, prison, where your freedom is taken from you and you are captive. And he was in prison, probably in the city of Rome. So we're not sure, he doesn't say, but he mentions his chains. You know what chains are? They're loops like that, endless. They're links of metal that sometimes are used to bind someone, perhaps on the wrist and then to the wall, so the person cannot move. Paul mentions he is in chains, and he wrote the letter to encourage the church and to correct some things about their life and to teach them. So Christians later collected the letters that Paul wrote, and that became part of our Bible. Churches found these letters so helpful and recognized that God was teaching through these letters. So far we read the introduction. Paul mentioned that he prays regularly for this church and other churches. I need to get my glasses out of my pocket here. Excuse me a second. He mentions that he prays for the church regularly, and he especially prays for Christian character. We often pray for health, for work, for money, for our PR. yeah, really. And we should pray for those things. But Paul cared even more about character, our Christian character. And he mentions here 3 character traits that he wants to see in Christians. He mentioned it early in chapter 1. And the 3 are faith, hope, and love. That Christians should be people of deep faith and people of love, especially love one another. We will take a minute and think about these, and hope. What did I do with set my thing down, but fortunately Way gave lots. So let's think about these 3. In another letter, we call it 1 Corinthians, Paul said that love is the greatest of these. We'll just take a minute to think about them. Faith, in Christian terms, it's faith in Jesus. So what do we mean by faith in Jesus? When I met my wife, Marilyn, and was very attracted to her, and we developed a relationship and a friendship, and I knew that more than anything I wanted to spend my life with her, and I asked her to marry me, and she said yes, and so we've been married. I had faith in her character, in her faithfulness to me, that she would be loyal to me. And I had a confidence that she would bring out the best in me. And so the step of marriage is really a step of faith, isn't it? And there's always some risk in any step of faith. It wouldn't be faith if there weren't risk. You understand what risk is? You all took a risk when you left China or Canada, but you had faith that perhaps a better life was here or more opportunity. But it's a risk. Sherry, you're looking doubtful. Anyway, I shouldn't put you on the spot like that. That's an English expression, do you know, to be put on the spot. Do you know that expression? I just put her on the spot by putting the spotlight on her. Everybody's looking because I mentioned her name, and so that's to be put on the spot. So Christian faith is the belief that loyalty to Jesus and following Jesus, learning from Jesus, learning how to live, makes more sense than following anyone else or modeling your life after any other philosophy. That's what faith is. The early Christians were willing to die for their faith. I know there have been Christians in China who have suffered imprisonment and loss of many things rather than renounce their faith in Jesus and give their loyalty to the government or to anyone else. Why would anyone do that? Only because they are convinced that Jesus gives life. And loyalty to Jesus is better than anything else we could have. So that's what faith is. That's what Paul was praying, that for the Colossian Christians, their faith would deepen, get more confident, stronger and stronger. I have been a Christian now for 62 years. I'm 74. I became a Christian when I was 12. And I am more convinced than ever that Jesus is worth absolute trust, complete trust. So that's faith. Hope. What is hope? It is an optimism about the future, seeing something that isn't reality yet, that lies in the future, but you are sure of, or have confidence is coming. That's hope. In English, we use the word in two different senses. Sometimes we use it as a synonym for the word to wish. So people hope that the Saskatchewan Roughriders football team will do well this year. But we don't know. But we hope it will be good. We hope the summer will be nice. We hope spring will come soon. But we don't know. But that's a wish. But hope in the Bible sense is something deeper. It's a belief that God is going to bring about a new world. And He's already started that in the Christian movement. But one day Jesus will return, and all evil will be gone. And God will recreate all things. And He will change us completely so that we will no longer have to fight with sin and with our own character flaws and so on. He's already at work in us, which stirs our hope. To stir. Metaphorically, to stir is to move in our hearts. So that is the Christian hope. So I had a friend just recently die. He was almost 90, so he was an older man. But I hope to see him again. Not just a wish, but I have a confidence I will see him in eternity, in glory. I have a strong hope of eternal life, that when I die, I will go to be with Jesus. That is my hope. So Paul was praying that Christians would deepen in faith and also in hope. And then love. You all know what love is. In the Christian sense, though, it is the capacity and the move in our hearts to care for even those who are difficult. Jesus taught us to love our enemies and to forgive our enemies. He taught us to honor people of low estate, people that others don't respect or don't care about. So Jesus spent time with blind people, lame people, deaf people, with prostitutes that he cared to turn their life around, with tax collectors. I've talked about this in the past with the class, that you are all too young to remember, but there was a time when Japan occupied China in the Second World War. Of course, there are other times farther back. And always an occupier makes an arrangement with some of the national people to work for them. We call them collaborators. That's a negative term. If they collaborate or work with the occupier, with the enemy. Tax collectors in Jesus' day were working for the Roman occupiers in Israel. The great empire of Rome had conquered Israel. Roman soldiers everywhere, but they paid Jewish people to collect taxes. So people hated the tax collectors. But Jesus treated them with dignity. So that's what Christian love is, to love the unlovable, those who are difficult to love. And Christians begin to change in their heart to love that way. In this sense, Christian love is not so much a feeling, though it is a feeling, but it's more a choice. We choose to love. And so love is an action. It's not simply a feeling, but it's an action. So if I choose to love a tax collector, it would mean I speak to him kindly. I invite him to my home. If he has a need, I try to meet his need. So love in the Christian sense can be seen with our eyes, its actions, and so love becomes a choice. Jesus also changes our hearts, so our feelings also begin to change. But sometimes when we love, we don't feel like being kind, but we do it because Jesus wants us to do it. And so we love as a choice. So anyway, Paul was praying that this kind of character would emerge in Christian people. This is an aside, but what will we take with us into the next world? Assuming that there is more to life after death, and we're conscious in another world, another reality, what will we take from this world into that world?
Nothing. So.
We won't take
Nothing but soul.
Our soul.
Yeah.
Our soul.
We'll take our soul. I think that we'll take two things. We won't take our money. We won't take our prestige, our titles, whatever we were. But I think we'll take our character. That's our soul. The kind of person we've become, we will take into the next world. And we will take our influence or impact. Put those words up here. The way I'm using the words, they are synonyms. Influence and impact. We can have an immediate impact. If I, say, tore that in piece, I would have an impact on this piece of paper. But we have an impact on people in our relationships, don't we? We make a difference depending on how we treat people. We impact them, to use it as a verb. It can be a verb, to impact, or a noun, the impact of someone. So I have grandchildren. I have 5 granddaughters, 4 live in the area, and they have an enormous impact on me. Just as another aside, a joke. One of the most difficult things in learning language is grasping jokes or humor, funny things. I saw a t-shirt. I should buy this t-shirt. It said on the t-shirt, "I don't have to listen to you. You're not my granddaughter." You have to think about that. The joke is saying that grandfathers do whatever their granddaughters want them to do. We can't say no to our granddaughters. If they want something, we will give it to them. It's not a good thing. And my son says, don't do that. He'll say, is that helping their character? If you just give them whatever they want or do whatever they want? Recently, one of my granddaughters, they live in Balgony, just east of the city, and her car wouldn't start. So she phoned me and said, "Papa," she calls me, "would you come and get me and bring me to the university?" She had a class, so I went. And my son said, "How is she going to learn to plug her car in and look after her car if you just go and get her?" Anyway, that's all to say that certain people have a great impact on us. Our children, our parents. Your parents have had a great impact on you, haven't they?
Even
Yeah.
our friends, I think. So.
Friends
Yeah.
as well, especially good friends.
Yeah,
But
sure.
even bad friends have an impact on us.
Yeah.
So I think that we take into eternity our impact as well. I think it's only then that we will understand fully how helpful we have been to other people. It'll be more obvious in eternity. Many of the people who have greatly helped me may be unaware of just how much maybe a kind word or a kind action has meant to me and shaped me. Well, I think we will bring that impact into eternity. But nothing else, will we? So that's why Paul, when he prayed, cared more about character, faith, hope, and love than about our PR or our next job or something. Those are important, though, and Jesus taught us to pray for our daily bread. I think that means for our needs, the things that are part of our life, but even more important is our character. After that, Paul emphasized what has happened for Christians, and we might want to go back to that briefly. You've got your Bible open, and look at verses 13 and 14. It says, "For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins." So we've got several words here that are key in Christianity, and Paul is simply reminding them. So there are two of the words that he used: to rescue. To rescue implies that someone was in trouble and someone else got them out of trouble. The word redeem we don't use so much today, but especially in the ancient world it meant to pay money to buy the freedom of a slave. Slavery was very common in the Roman Empire, and a family could pay money to buy the freedom of someone. So that's to redeem. I mentioned when we looked at this that the way we use it in English today, the word redeem, is to make up for an error. So I used the illustration, if I forgot my wife's birthday, I would need to redeem myself. I would need to do something to make up for my error. But it's much deeper in Bible times. It means to buy the freedom. Then Paul used these two words. Dominion and kingdom. He rescued us or redeemed us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom. They're synonyms, really. They refer to a territory ruled by someone. And Paul is saying we're all in one territory or the other. Canada used to be called the Dominion of Canada. And it's related to the verb to dominate. To dominate means to rule exclusively. So the Dominion of Canada would be the territory that is known as Canada. And a kingdom is an area ruled by a king. And then Paul makes a further contrast. says the Colossians used to live in the dominion of darkness, and they've been rescued or transferred from that dominion into the kingdom of God's Son. And the Bible often contrasts darkness and light, evil and good. So Christians, he's reminding the Colossians that they have been brought from one kingdom and put into a new kingdom. And that's what God has done in our lives. So now we have a different ruler, a different king, a different master. Not Satan, but Jesus. That's what he's saying there. The kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. And that's at the heart of Christianity, that our sins are forgiven. Jesus took them on himself at the cross. Then he talked in verses 15 to 20 of who Jesus is. And it's I won't go over it all again, but it was a beautiful description of how Jesus is God the Son, who created everything, then became a human being and died for us. And he is the head of his church. And the hint there, it's in verse 20, that God is, through Jesus, reconciling to himself all things. Things in heaven and on earth. So one day, all reality, not just people, but all reality and all spiritual powers will be under Jesus. And he'll bring everything together in harmony again and in goodness, in glory. So anyway, that's what Paul has written so far. And we have about 10 minutes left, so we'll pick it up. And we'll read that paragraph from verse 21 through 23. Let's see. Sherry, would you like to read aloud? Just read verse 21, and then Jing can read verse 22, and Tom can read verse 23, which is a very long one, Tom, but you can do it.
Once you were alienated from alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior.
Good.
Okay, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation.
Okay.
If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you heard and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a servant.
Okay, good, very good. So, verse 21, once you were alienated, that's the verb to become alienated. Hello. You can come in if you want. Oh, you need to go?
Sorry.
That's okay. Anyway, glad you came.
Thank you.
You're welcome anytime. God bless.
Thank you.
Okay.
下次再来。
Okay, okay.
The noun,
No problem.
the noun alien would be a synonym for foreigner or stranger. When you are in a new country, you often feel alien. That is, everything feels strange. And people may see you as different as well. That's to be alien. We also use the word in English to talk about life that may be somewhere in the universe that we don't know about. So, are there aliens out there? Out way in the universe somewhere? That would be some kind of life that's not human, but is life. Again, science fiction makes much of this. So, but in the way it's being used here, and we use this commonly in English, alienation means separate from people that we should be in relationship with. But something has gone wrong in the relationship. So sometimes husbands and wives are alienated. Sometimes brothers and sisters become alienated. Something happens and they're angry, they can't forgive, and they're separated. Now, that's the way it's being used here. Once you were alienated from God, and when we're alienated from God, we try to be God ourselves and decide what's right and wrong, and we want to rule our own life. Enemies in your minds. Paul is saying that most of life starts in our mind, in our attitude. So once we were hostile toward God, turned our back to Him, ran away from Him, you were alienated from God, and you were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. That is, our behavior grieves God or causes God pain, sadness, and anger. Just like our children's behavior can sometimes grieve us and make us angry. Especially if our children are cruel to their siblings or something.
Impact.
There's a great impact on us and on others. And that's why this matters, because there is such an impact. So once you were alienated from God, enemies because of your evil behavior, but now He has reconciled you by Christ's physical body. So reconciled, brought back into relationship. How? Because of Jesus and His death on the cross for our sins. He has brought us back to God. He's paid the price for our sin and made it possible for us to come back to be in relationship with God again. And He wants to present us holy in His sight, without blemish and free from accusation. That means forgiven. A blemish, when we are teenagers, often there are blemishes on our skin, and we're embarrassed and so on. But a blemish would be a mark of some kind that is not attractive, that shouldn't be there. It can be on our skin, or we can have a blemish on our report card. If we did well on all the exams except one, we would call that a blemish on our report card, a mark there that we wish weren't there, we'd like to fix. Well, we will be presented to God without blemish, completely forgiven, completely changed. That's what Paul is saying, free from accusation. That is, no one will be able to say, he did this. God will say, it's forgiven. Don't worry about it. There's nothing that the evil one can say, oh, but Ron did this, did that. No, it's all forgiven. All dealt with. No more accusation. The verb to accuse. To accuse would be to point out a fault in someone else. So when our children are fighting, they will accuse the other of being the one in the wrong. That's to accuse. He did it. He took my toy. He did. That's to accuse. No one will be able to accuse us. And Paul says, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, not moved from the hope. And that is the good news of the gospel. Really, the gospel is simply the good news that God has acted to save the world by Jesus. And we can be forgiven, back into relationship with God by faith in Jesus. So that Paul is just reminding them of these great truths. Well, it's coming 4 o'clock, so next week we'll pick it up at verse 24, and Paul will talk a bit about his own life at that point. Here he's simply reminding the Christians of the truth of the gospel and encouraging them to hold on to these truths. Hold on to them. Any questions or words that we've come across, or words that I have used that you would like me to explain?
Could you please tell me the difference from Bible to gospel?
From Bible?
Bible, and what's the difference?
Okay. The Bible would refer to the entire book here.
And what's the gospel?
And gospel is a message. The Bible contains the message, but the Bible also has history, and it has poetry and things besides gospel. So gospel would be a subcategory in the big category of the Bible. So the Bible is 66 books collected here. This is a Bible, and it has 66 different books, from Genesis to Revelation. And we're reading one of those books, Colossians. So the Bible is made up of all of those books.
听懂没？
没听懂。
Okay, let me tell him what you
Okay.
said. He didn't quite understand.
Okay?
他说，圣经就是一本书，圣经里面有66卷书。
嗯
我们从这个创世纪一直到启示录，我们现在学的是这个哥罗西书其中的一卷书。
OK。
然后呢，这个 gospel 呢是福音。当然，圣经里面它包括福音啊，就是一个好消息了，就是耶稣为我们而死，我们可以这个相信他，我们将来能有永生，这就是一个好消息，这就叫 gospel， 这就叫福音。当然，圣经里面呢，除了福音以外，还有其他的东西，有些历史啊，有些记载啊。
OK。
啊，就这个意思。
好，谢谢。
Bible 都是圣经。
我跟他查了一下，他说这个 gospel 是福音书。我说那这个福音书
4本福音书嘛，那个就是叫什么 Luke， 还有那个 Mark， 还有那个 Matthew， 还有一个叫 John， 4本福
We
音书。
use the word in 2 ways.
他说我们用这个词儿是有2种用法了。
哦。
一个就是形容词的福音的，另外一个就是4福音书，他刚才说的那个4个福音书。
4福音书包含在这个圣经里边吗？
就是新约
这里面吗？
新约的头4卷书啊。
Matthew Luke， Mark，
我明白了，我明白了。
新约里边的前4个书。
就是这个 gospel。
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John.
Right. I don't know if this will be helpful at all, but we use the word in 2 different ways, and actually we use it in English in a 3rd way I'll come to. But a gospel is an account of Jesus' life. So that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Tell the story of what Jesus did. They're not simply a biography. They leave out many things we're curious about. We have very little of Jesus' childhood. We don't know what he looked like. There are many things we don't know about him. But it's the story of his, especially his teaching and his dying for us on the cross and his resurrection. So that's the account of Jesus' life, and we have the 4 Gospels. But it's also an announcement and invitation is the Gospel. It's the announcement that God has acted to save the world by sending his Son into the world to die for us and then to be raised from the dead. In the invitation, God wants you to be part of his family. And this is how you do it, by putting your faith in Jesus. We use the word gospel in a third way. People will sometimes say something to us and say, and that's the gospel truth. So gospel truth means it's really true. You can count on it. I'm telling you the truth. That's the gospel truth. So it's a synonym for a true story, really. The gospel truth. It actually, the word in Greek simply means good news. Simply good news. But we use it technically for the good news about Jesus. It's the good news about Jesus.
I have a question
Sure.
about both gospel and AI. So we, our House of Mandarin group, we are planning to restore the gospel night, monthly gospel potluck evening.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So because we haven't done that for a long time, and at that time, maybe 5 years ago, there was no AI, no ChatGPT. So I was curious about that. I asked ChatGPT about gospel meeting. So it gave me some answers about the purpose of gospel night, the setting up, the agenda, the content. What should we include? So I download it and make it as a PDF document and send it to our brothers and sisters group. And I said, I asked ChatGPT, this is the answer it gave me. So do you think this is an okay practice to ask questions about our faith to ChatGPT?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
But it may be safe. It seems that those who have created these AI instruments have been pretty good, so they haven't, we call it skewed the answer in a certain ideological direction. They seem pretty balanced and open. My son uses it all the time for things.
So maybe ask your son, because I
Yeah,
know
see
he's
what
also
he
a
thinks.
Christian.
Yes, that's right. And he thinks that it's fairly reliable to give you at least an outline of the issues. Maybe I'm just old and resistant to it. But I guess I would rather talk to other Christians about how to do things like, we used to call it House of Mandarin, that monthly potluck and gospel night. But I think you could tell whether it's reliable by the kind of advice it's giving you. If you can read it and say, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's
to me
good.
it's satisfactory to me.
Okay,
yeah,
then
I
it's
think it's
probably
very
just
good
fine.
answer.
Yeah, if they didn't suggest anything weird or
I don't
discourage you or something from it. My very small experience with this AI is that it's fairly bland. The answers it gives are very general and not
Specific. Right?
not very specific and not helping me think deeply about it. I guess they're a bit bland or a bit shallow.
Yeah, I just want to see a general idea about and how it responds to my question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's very good. I think I'm curious too, and my son too. My son trained first in computer science. He
Right.
does other things now, but he's still very curious about these things, and so when we're talking about something, he'll sometimes say, I wonder what ChatGPT would say, and so he'll ask him
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
just to see. And so he is not afraid of technology. Maybe I am a little more, or I'm a little more pessimistic about the value of these things. But especially with something like how to conduct a night like that's fairly... but if you asked it, was Jesus the Son of God? I wonder what it would say.
Okay, I'll go back and try and see what it says.
It would probably say some people Christians believe that Jesus was the Son of God, and
But on the other hand, some other people
other
say
people will say no,
Yeah.
and so on. That's probably what it would
yeah.
what it would say.
I think if God creates everything in the world,
Hmm.
the AI also was also created by God.
Hmm.
ChatGPT
Good point.
is created by God too.
Mm.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, I would challenge that just a little bit, Tom.
Okay.
I think that you are correct that we should not assume that created things are bad. I think God created the world good, and I think everything has the potential for good. But I think experience teaches us that every advance in technology can be used for good or for great evil.
Yeah.
So it's maybe the technology is neutral. But maybe it's not. I don't know, some technology. But it really depends on how it is used. The atomic breakthroughs would be the best example, that atomic energy can be used for good, to create energy, to heat homes, but it can also be used to make bombs, to destroy masses of people, depending on how it's used. And I would guess artificial intelligence the same way.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, aren't robotics being used to create armies?
Mm-hmm.
Last
Yeah.
question. Does the God create things continue from today?
God still creating things?
你就说上帝是不是在继续创造新的事物？
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, yeah.
His question is, has God been continuing creating things
Mm.
until now?
I think that God has created the world in such a way that it is evolving still, and human beings are part of creating or improving creation toward a goal. In fact, in Genesis, when God created humans, they are to rule and look after creation and bring it to its flourishing, to its best. So I think creation is ongoing in that sense, that we are to help things, we're to look after the garden, just like a gardener plants and weeds and waters and so on to bring something out. I think humans are to help creation develop. But I don't know if anything new is coming into our world that God is doing. I don't know that there's what I would call new creation. Although humans who become Christians are called a new creation. So God is still doing that. That is, in us, He makes us new.
You are the new creation, one
Yes.
of the new creations.
Yes. Because God is working in your life and in my life to change us and to make us the people He intended us to be from the beginning. And as Paul says here, we were once enemies. We did not want to be the person God created us to be. We had better ideas. I want to be the king of the world, or I want to be Elon Musk and something, instead of serving God. So as a new creation, God is now redoing us, recreating us. So there is that new creation. And the promise is that when Jesus returns, He will fix creation. It's often called new creation, new heavens and a new earth, and it will be perfect and beautiful. So, but I don't know about new creation, if God is creating new things now.
New planet in the universe.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, you're very welcome. Good to see all of you as usual.
Maybe his mean just ask you, does the God is following the nowadays developing or just like something, yeah?
Yeah, and that is a very good question. How active is God in what is going on with AI?
Yeah.
Is God looking at, oh, what are they doing now?
Because
Or
he
is
can follow
God
the,
guiding it
yeah, follow
in
the
some way?
steps in nowadays
Yeah.
or not, right?
Yeah, I think God is very active in human life, but I also think God has given a certain freedom to humans to take His good gifts and use them for good or for evil. So I think God is in many ways encouraging and restricting or curbing over here when people use their freedom for evil. In fact, I think death came into the world to limit the evil we can do. Because even the most evil person will die and they can do no more damage to our world. That's one limit that God puts on. And I think He is very active in the world. But I don't think we should blame God for AI. I don't know. That's a very good question. Or for robots. I wonder what kind of world our children will live in. Let's see. Sherry, would you like to read aloud? Just read verse 21, and then Jing can read verse 22, and Tom can read verse 23, which is a very long one, Tom, but you can do it.
Once you were alienated from alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior.
Good.
But
Okay, Jing.
now He has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in His sight, without blemish and free from accusation.
Okay.
If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you heard and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a servant.
Okay, good, very good. So, verse 21, once you were alienated, that's the verb to become alienated. Hello. You can come in if you want. Oh, you need to go?
Sorry.
That's okay. Anyway, glad you came.
Okay, thank
You're
you.
welcome anytime. God
Thank you,
bless.
thank you.
Okay.
下次再
bye-bye.
来。
Okay, okay.
The noun
No problem.
The noun alien would be a synonym for foreigner or stranger. When you are in a new country, you often feel alien. That is, everything feels strange. And people may see you as different as well. That's to be alien. We also use the word in English to talk about life that may be somewhere in the universe that we don't know about. So, are there aliens out there? Out way in the universe somewhere? That would be some kind of life that's not human, but is life. Again, science fiction makes much of this. So But in the way it's being used here, and we use this commonly in English, alienation means separate from people that we should be in relationship with. But something has gone wrong in the relationship. So sometimes husbands and wives are alienated. Sometimes brothers and sisters become alienated. Something happens and they're angry, they can't forgive, and they're separated. Now, that's the way it's being used here. Once you were alienated from God, and when we're alienated from God, we try to be God ourselves and decide what's right and wrong, and we want to rule our own life. Enemies in your minds. Paul is saying that most of life starts in our mind, in our attitude. So once we were hostile toward God, turned our back to Him, ran away from Him, you were alienated from God, and you were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. That is, our behavior grieves God or causes God pain, sadness, and anger. Just like our children's behavior can sometimes grieve us and make us angry, especially if our children are cruel to their siblings or something.
Impact.
There's a great impact on us and on others. And that's why this matters, because there is such an impact. So once you were alienated from God, enemies, because of your evil behavior, but now He has reconciled you by Christ's physical body. So reconciled, brought back into relationship. How? Because of Jesus and His death on the cross for our sins. He has brought us back to God. He's paid the price for our sin and made it possible for us to come back to be in relationship with God again. And He wants to present us holy in His sight, without blemish and free from accusation. That means forgiven. A blemish, when we are teenagers, often there are blemishes on our skin, and we're embarrassed and so on. But a blemish would be a mark of some kind that is not attractive, that shouldn't be there. It can be on our skin, or we can have a blemish on our report card. If we did well on all the exams except one, we would call that a blemish on our report card, a mark there that we wish weren't there, we'd like to fix. Well, we will be presented to God without blemish, completely forgiven, completely changed. That's what Paul is saying, free from accusation. That is, no one will be able to say, he did this. God will say, it's forgiven. Don't worry about it. There's nothing that the evil one can say, oh, but Ron did this, did that. No, it's all forgiven. All dealt with. No more accusation. The verb to accuse. To accuse would be to point out a fault in someone else. So when our children are fighting, they will accuse the other of being the one in the wrong. That's to accuse. He did it. He took my toy. He did. That's to accuse. No one will be able to accuse us. And Paul says, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, not moved from the hope. And that is the good news of the gospel. Really, the gospel is simply the good news that God has acted to save the world by Jesus. And we can be forgiven, back into relationship with God by faith in Jesus. So that Paul is just reminding them of these great truths. So it's coming 4 o'clock, so next week we'll pick it up at verse 24, and Paul will talk a bit about his own life at that point. Here he's simply reminding the Christians of the truth of the gospel and encouraging them to hold on to these truths. Hold on to them.